Alexander Scott had 10 weddings and 10 divorces in a single year, earning him the title of Manhattan's most untamable bachelor, until his meddling mother introduced him to a barista who didn't just match his arrogance, she turned it into her personal playground. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. There were rich men, and then there was Alexander Scott. Not wealthy in a tasteful, quiet sort of way. No, Lex, as he insisted people call him, was wealthy in the way that said I could buy your country just to build a bigger pool. At 34, his jawline was so sharp it could cut glass. His suits were custom-tailored down to the last thread, and his taste had clearly been blessed by the gods of expensive grooming. Unfortunately, his personality was just as sharp, and about as warm as an iceberg. It wasn't that he was cruel, exactly. It was that Alexander Scott operated with an unwavering belief that the world existed to meet his needs, preferably before he even thought of them. And if it didn't, he had no trouble letting you know. Which is why he was currently sitting at his mahogany desk in the top floor of Scott Industries, grinning at his assistant like a man who'd just gotten away with something deliciously wicked. "Number 10, he said, swirling a tumbler of 30-year-old scotch like a celebratory trophy. His assistant, poor Daniel, blinked. "I beg your pardon, sir?" "Divorce number 10, Lex clarified, with the same casualness another man might say. "I bought a new tie. This one lasted, 3 weeks? No, wait, 24 days. I'll have to check the paperwork." Daniel made a noise halfway between a sigh and a groan. "Shall I have legal send over the standard settlement agreement?" Yes. Lex waved a hand, already scrolling through his phone. "Throw in something generous. She was nice enough, I suppose. Just not," he paused, searching for the word, "compatible." Daniel bit his tongue. Compatible in Lex Scott's dictionary meant willing to put up with my nonsense without complaint. Downstairs, in the quieter, less absurd part of the city, Lex's mother, Loretta Scott, was sitting in her favorite corner of Café Amour, sipping a caramel latte and silently wondering where she had gone wrong. Her son, her only son, had become the most spectacular marital disaster in Manhattan. 10 marriages in 1 year. 10. Loretta had hoped the first one was just youthful folly. By the third, she was concerned. By the 7th, she was on the verge of staging an intervention. Now, after the 10th, she was tired. Bone deep, soul-level tired. Loretta was not the kind of woman who gave up easily. She was elegant, sophisticated, and wielded her social influence like a saber. But this was exhausting. She had been to more weddings than she could remember, her own son's weddings, for heaven's sake, and endured the whispers, the tabloid headlines, the knowing smirks from other mothers. Lex, of course, thought it was all terribly funny. He'd told her just the other night, over dinner at a 5-star French restaurant. "Mother, perhaps I'm just not built for lifelong commitment. Some people collect art. I collect ex-wives." Loretta had nearly stabbed him with her escargot fork. But as she sipped her coffee, something shifted. A thought. No, an idea. She didn't need a woman who would change Lex. She needed a woman who could handle him. Someone who could give him a taste of his own medicine, throw his arrogance back in his face, and not crumble under the weight of his ego. Her gaze wandered idly over the cafe counter and landed on a young woman she'd seen many times before. The barista, Talish, with curly hair pulled into a messy bun, an apron dusted with coffee grounds, and an expression that said she'd seen every kind of customer and wasn't impressed by any of them. When a man in an expensive suit tried to skip the line, she stopped him cold with a single raised eyebrow and the kind of slow, unimpressed glance Loretta herself had perfected in her youth. Interesting. Very interesting. Loretta took another sip of her latte, hiding the beginnings of a smile. Perhaps she wasn't done trying just yet. The mid-morning rush at Café Amour was in full swing, steam wands hissing, espresso machines whirring, and the low hum of caffeine-deprived chatter filling the air. The smell of freshly ground coffee beans clung to everything, wrapping around customers like an aromatic hug they didn't know they needed. Samantha Brooks was in her element. She moved behind the counter like a well-rehearsed dancer. Grind, tamp, pull, steam, pour. Her hands working on autopilot while her mind cataloged orders, customer quirks, and the ever-growing list of people she needed to side-eye. "Medium cappuccino with almond milk, extra hot," she called, sliding the cup toward a suited man who didn't even bother looking up from his phone. She'd been here long enough to recognize regulars by their drinks alone. The polite young teacher with the chai latte. The college student with the triple espresso who looked like she hadn't slept since the Bush administration. And then there was the grand dame of caramel lattes, Loretta Scott. Sam noticed her the moment she walked in. Not because she was flashy, Loretta dressed with understated elegance, but because she radiated the kind of authority that made people step aside without knowing why. Today, she wore a tailored cream coat, silk scarf, and that calm smile that hinted she knew everyone's secrets and wasn't above using them. "Good morning, Miss Scott," Sam greeted, already reaching for the caramel syrup. "The usual?" "Yes, please, dear," Loretta replied, settling into her corner table like it was a throne. "And how are you this morning?" "Still vertical," Sam said dryly, pulling a shot of espresso. "That's a win in my book." Loretta's eyes sparkled with faint amusement. Most people, when faced with her polite inquiries, scrambled to impress her. Sam never did. She answered honestly, often sarcastically, and without a trace of the deference Loretta was accustomed to. "Lovely as always," Loretta said, accepting the cup when Sam placed it before her. She took a sip, then leaned on the counter just slightly. "Busy morning?" "Same as every morning," Sam replied, wiping a stray drop of milk from the machine. "Everyone wants their caffeine in the exact way their soul demands it, and I'm the magician who makes it happen." "Magician, barista, therapist," Loretta said thoughtfully. "I imagine you see all sorts here." "You'd be surprised," Sam said, glancing toward a man in line trying, unsuccessfully, to flirt with the woman ahead of him. "Or maybe you wouldn't." Loretta's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than usual. It wasn't just polite interest. There was calculation there, like she was quietly weighing and measuring Sam against an invisible checklist. Sam noticed. She always noticed. "You're looking at me like you're figuring out where I'd fit in your chess game," she said, arching a brow. Loretta laughed softly, the sound warm but deliberate. "Oh, I don't play chess anymore. Too predictable." "Uh-huh." Sam smirked. "So this is you what? Playing poker?" Loretta only smiled, a slow, knowing curve of her lips. "Perhaps." The rest of the shift passed in a blur, but Loretta lingered long after her latte was finished, tapping idly at her phone and occasionally watching Sam navigate the chaos behind the counter with an easy mix of efficiency and sass. When the last of the morning rush finally trickled out, she rose, gliding back toward the counter. "I'm hosting a small dinner at my home later this week," Loretta said casually, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "You should come. No need to bring anything." Sam blinked. "You're inviting me? To your home?" "Of course," Loretta said smoothly. "Consider it a thank you for all the perfectly crafted lattes." Sam hesitated. On the one hand, dinner at the home of Manhattan's social elite wasn't exactly her usual Thursday night. On the other, she was deeply suspicious of why Loretta wanted her there. Still, curiosity had always been her downfall. "All right," she said slowly. "But if this turns out to be some kind of multi-level marketing pitch, I'm leaving before dessert." Loretta's laugh was genuine this time. "Trust me, Samantha. It's nothing of the sort." But as Loretta swept out of the cafe, scarf fluttering behind her, Sam had the unsettling feeling she'd just stepped onto a game board she didn't even know existed. Samantha had been to fancy places before. The occasional friend's wedding, a charity gala she'd been dragged to once, but nothing prepared her for the Scott penthouse. The building alone was the kind of place that made you straighten your posture just by walking into the lobby. Marble floors, gold accents, a doorman whose suit probably cost more than her rent. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, she stepped into a space that screamed money before she even saw the man who owned it. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the entire far wall, Manhattan glittering beyond them. A sleek black grand piano sat untouched in one corner, its surface gleaming under soft recessed lighting. The air smelled faintly of leather and something expensive she couldn't name. Probably a candle that cost as much as her monthly grocery budget. "Ah, Samantha, there you are," Loretta said warmly, rising from one of the cream leather armchairs. She looked utterly at home in the luxury, like she'd been born in it, which Sam supposed she probably had. Then Loretta turned slightly, and Sam's gaze landed on the man standing by the bar. Alexander Scott. Of course she recognized him. You couldn't live in New York and not know his face. The tabloids loved him. Billionaire playboy marries again. Scott's latest bride walks after 9 days. Number 8 flees to Bali, claims creative differences. She'd never seen him in person, though. He was annoyingly attractive. Tall, broad-shouldered, suit tailored so perfectly it probably had its own stock portfolio. And he had the kind of face that made you suspicious, like it had gotten away with far too much in life. "Mother," Lex said lazily, his voice smooth, deep, and laced with the faintest hint of amusement. "You didn't tell me we were having company." "I told you yesterday," Loretta replied, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. "You weren't listening." Lex's eyes moved to Sam, and the corner of his mouth curved upward in a slow, knowing smirk. "So this is the famous barista. The one who makes the latte." "Guilty," Sam said flatly. "And you must be Mr. 10 Weddings." The smirk faltered, just for a fraction of a second. "Excuse me? You've been married 10 times, she said, stepping farther into the room as though it were any old living room and not the cover of an architecture magazine. "I read the news. I'm assuming they weren't all arranged for tax benefits." Loretta coughed discreetly into her hand, but her eyes sparkled with barely contained glee. Lex recovered quickly, his smirk snapping back into place. "Ah, a woman who does her homework." "Not homework," Sam corrected, glancing at the marble countertop near the bar. "It's hard to avoid your name when it's in the gossip section every other week. You're basically a public service announcement for prenups." That earned a low chuckle from Loretta. Lex, however, looked like no one had spoken to him like that in years, maybe ever. He sauntered closer, his hands in his pockets, eyes locked on hers like he was trying to read a particularly interesting but infuriating book. "And yet," he said smoothly, "you still agreed to come here." Sam tilted her head, unbothered by his proximity. "Curiosity. I wanted to see if you're as ridiculous in person as you are in print." "And, oh, definitely," she said without hesitation. "Maybe more so." Lex blinked. He wasn't offended, not exactly, more fascinated. Most people went out of their way to flatter him. This woman, in her simple blouse and well-worn boots, was dismantling him one sentence at a time. "Mother," he said slowly, his gaze still on Sam, "are you trying to set me up?" Loretta's voice was syrupy sweet. "Would that be so terrible?" "Yes," Sam said at the exact same time Lex said. "Possibly." For a moment, silence hung in the air, then Loretta laughed. Not a polite society chuckle, but a genuine, delighted laugh. "Dinner's in 20 minutes, she said, gliding toward the kitchen. "I'll let you two get acquainted." The moment she was gone, Lex leaned against the bar, studying Sam like a puzzle he wasn't sure how to solve. "So," he said, "tell me, Miss Brooks, are you always this charming, or is it just for me?" "Oh, it's just for you," Sam replied sweetly. "Everyone else gets the nice version." And with that, she walked past him to pour herself a glass of water, leaving Lex staring after her, the faintest flicker of something he couldn't quite name in his chest. Loretta Scott was many things: a philanthropist, a socialite, a woman whose dinner parties could change the trajectory of someone's career. But above all, she was persistent. The evening after Sam's first encounter with Lex, Loretta sat at her mirrored vanity, brushing her hair with the slow, methodical strokes of a general plotting a battle. She'd seen the look in her son's eyes when Sam had walked into the penthouse, that flicker of curiosity. Lex could pretend all he liked that he was immune, but Loretta knew better. And Samantha Brooks, she had passed the first test. Unintimidated, sharp-tongued, immune to Lex's overpolished charm. Exactly the type Loretta needed to tether her son before he turned 40 and started dating models half his age exclusively. So she set her plan into motion. The next week, Sam found herself on the receiving end of a suspicious number of invitations. Dinner at the Scott's brownstone. Lunch at Loretta's favorite rooftop garden cafe. Tickets to an exclusive art exhibit where Loretta just happened to bring Lex along. "Ms. Scott," Sam said one afternoon, standing in the cafe with her apron dusted in cinnamon. "You do know I have a job, right? I can't just disappear into your high society schedule every other day." "Oh, nonsense," Loretta replied, waving a manicured hand. "Everyone needs a little excitement in their life. Besides, I've decided I like your company." Sam narrowed her eyes. "And this has nothing to do with your son?" Loretta's smile was pure diplomacy. "I simply think you two have chemistry." "Chemistry?" Sam scoffed. "Pretty sure the correct term is mutual tolerance at best." Loretta just sipped her latte. At the next dinner, Sam arrived to find only two place settings, hers and Lex's, at the massive dining table. "Mother's running late," Lex said, pouring himself a glass of wine. He wore a black button-down with the sleeves rolled, exposing forearms that Sam absolutely refused to find attractive. Apparently, she had to stop and talk to a friend about the charity auction. Sam raised an eyebrow, sliding into her chair. "Let me guess. She told you I'd be here." "No," Lex said, smirking, "but I'm starting to suspect she told you I'd be here." They ate, trading barbed remarks between bites. Lex teased her about her humble coffee kingdom, and Sam pointed out that at least no one had ever divorced her in under a month. By the time Loretta finally swept in, 40 minutes late, she found them mid-argument about whether or not billionaires should have yachts the size of small nations. She hid her satisfaction behind a polite apology for her tardiness. Over the following weeks, Loretta's matchmaking grew less subtle. At a charity gala, she introduced Sam as someone I'd trust with my son's life, prompting Lex to choke on his champagne. At lunch, she asked Sam hypothetical questions about marriage while pretending to discuss current events. The first time Loretta suggested marriage outright, Sam laughed so hard she nearly dropped her fork. "Marry him?" she said, incredulous. "You mean Lex? The man who probably has a prenup template saved on his desktop." Loretta dabbed at her lips with a napkin. "Oh, he does. Several, in fact. But I think you could keep him in line." "I'm not a zookeeper," Sam replied, sipping her iced tea. "And I like my sanity." Loretta simply said, "You like him more than you think." It was at a charity auction, Loretta's doing, naturally, that something shifted. Sam had been roped into attending under the guise of helping with the silent auction table. Lex was there in a perfectly tailored midnight blue suit, looking infuriatingly at ease among the glittering crowd. At one point, a wealthy investor's wife made a cutting remark about Sam's job. Lex, without missing a beat, stepped in. "She's the best barista in the city," he said, his tone as sharp as his gaze. "And she actually works for a living, which is more than I can say for half the people here." Sam blinked. She wasn't used to being defended by him, or by any man in a tuxedo worth more than her car. After that night, Loretta's persistence became harder to brush off. Sam found herself replaying Lex's words when she least expected it. She told herself it was just gratitude, nothing more. But gratitude had a way of blurring into something else. It wasn't a grand proposal. There was no ring hidden in champagne or rooftop string quartet. There was just Loretta, sitting across from Sam at Café Amour one quiet afternoon, speaking in that calm, persuasive voice she used when she wanted something badly. "Just consider it," Loretta said. 1 year. You'd have financial security, adventure, and, most importantly, my gratitude. And if it doesn't work, you walk away. No strings." Sam stared into her latte, tracing the foam pattern with her spoon. She thought about Lex, his arrogance, his sharp wit, the way he looked when he was caught off guard. She thought about that night at the gala. "Fine," she said finally, exhaling. "But only because you're relentless." Loretta's smile was slow, triumphant. "I knew you'd come around." What Sam didn't know, what neither of them knew, was just how much their lives were about to change. The tabloids had been buzzing for weeks. Billionaire Bachelor bites the bullet, again. Wedding number 11. Will this one survive the honeymoon? Society bets, 20 days or less. Lex read them all with mild amusement, lounging in his penthouse office with a glass of champagne in hand. They're getting bolder, he remarked to Daniel, who had long since given up trying to dissuade his boss from reading gossip about himself. Daniel only grunted. What's the over-under this time? Lex smirked. 18 days. Generous. Loretta had spared no expense. The Scott estate garden had been transformed into a vision of white roses and twinkling fairy lights, with a string quartet playing softly in the background. Guests mingled in designer gowns and bespoke suits, exchanging the same whispered question. Who is she, and what is she thinking? Sam stood at the edge of it all, watching the scene like she'd accidentally wandered into a movie set. Her dress, ivory silk, fitted but not overly fussy, had been Loretta's pick, though Sam had put her foot down on the 7-foot veil. Lex, of course, looked like he'd stepped out of a luxury magazine spread. Black tuxedo, crisp white shirt, cufflinks that probably had their own insurance policy. When he caught sight of her walking down the aisle, his expression didn't change much. A slight curve at the corner of his mouth, equal parts smug and intrigued. The vows were mercifully short. Neither of them was the sentimental type. When it came time for the kiss, Lex leaned in with a practiced ease, and Sam, just to keep him on his toes, whispered, "Don't get used to it," before their lips met. He almost laughed mid-kiss. The reception was a blur of champagne toasts, clinking glasses, and camera flashes. Sam found herself cornered by socialites curious about her rise from the espresso machine to the altar, while Lex was pulled into conversations about mergers and yacht racing. They danced exactly once, a slow waltz that Lex performed flawlessly, leading her with confident hands. "You dance well," she admitted reluctantly. He smirked. "I do most things well." She stepped on his foot. By the time the last guest left and the last photographer packed up, it was close to midnight. Sam kicked off her heels the moment they stepped into the penthouse. Lex, loosening his bow tie, gestured down the hall. "Your room is the second on the left." "My room," she repeated. "Yes," he said, like it was obvious. "I believe in personal space. Keeps things civil." Sam tilted her head, studying him. "You're afraid I'll fall for you if we share a bed?" He chuckled. "I'm afraid you'll pretend to, and then sue me for emotional damages." "Wow," she said flatly. "Romantic. I'm nothing if not practical." Sam just smiled, not the polite kind, but the kind that said you have no idea what's coming. "Sure, Lex. Separate rooms. Whatever you say." Lex retired to his master suite, mentally congratulating himself on the arrangement. Boundaries, that was the key. Keep it cordial, keep it simple, keep it out of the bedroom. As he settled into bed, he glanced at the clock. 12:43 a.m. Marriage number 11 was officially underway. Somewhere down the hall, Sam was unpacking her overnight bag with the calm efficiency of a woman who'd already decided she wasn't going to follow his rules. And when she finally slipped into her silk pajamas and padded barefoot toward the master suite, she wasn't thinking about personal space at all. Lex was not a man easily startled. He'd faced hostile boardrooms, aggressive reporters, and a runaway yacht, long story, without breaking a sweat. He woke every morning at precisely 6:30, without an alarm, and spent the first 20 minutes reviewing market trends while sipping a meticulously brewed black coffee. But at 6:29 a.m., on the morning after his wedding to Samantha Brooks, Alexander Scott woke to something completely alien in his carefully controlled world. An arm. Around him. It was slender but firm, draped across his bare torso like it belonged there. His first thought was that this must be some bizarre dream. He never allowed uninvited guests in his bed. Then he felt the steady warmth of someone breathing against the back of his neck. He froze. Slowly, very slowly, he turned his head. Samantha. Hair mussed, still wearing her silk pajama top, face relaxed in deep sleep, her cheek pressed lightly to his shoulder. "What the hell?" he whispered under his breath. As if on cue, her eyes cracked open. She yawned like she had every right to be there, and murmured, "Morning, husband," before tightening her arm just a fraction. Lex sat up instantly, dislodging her grip. "What, how, why are you in my bed?" She sat up more slowly, stretching like a cat. "Because your bed is bigger and has better pillows." "Oh, and because you told me not to." "I what?" "You gave me my own room last night," she continued matter-of-factly, which was cute. "Really? But you forgot something important, Lex." He glared at her, still trying to piece together the violation of protocol. "And what's that?" She smiled sweetly. "I don't follow rules I didn't agree to." By the time they reached the kitchen, Lex was still muttering about boundaries. Sam ignored him completely, humming as she rummaged through the fridge like she'd lived there for years. "Who keeps this much Greek yogurt?" she asked, pulling out 2 identical cartons. "You could feed an entire CrossFit gym." "It's good for you," Lex said stiffly, making his coffee. Sam reached past him for his mug, and filled it with coffee before he could protest. She took a sip, winced, and added a generous splash of cream from the fridge. "That's disgusting," he said. "That's delicious," she countered, taking another sip. Lex pinched the bridge of his nose. "This is exactly why I wanted separate rooms. This is exactly why I didn't listen," she said cheerfully, setting her mug down. "You need someone to disrupt your, what do you call it, machine-like existence." "I call it efficiency. I call it boring." Later that morning, Lex found himself sitting in his office, staring blankly at a contract while Daniel recited figures. All he could think about was the weight of Sam's arm around him, how oddly grounding it had felt, even if it was infuriating. He tried to shake it off. She was clearly making a game of this, testing him, poking at his carefully maintained control. And he would not lose. At least, that's what he told himself when he went to bed that night. At 6:29 a.m. the next morning, he woke to find her there again. Same arm. Same smug little smile when she opened her eyes. "Morning," she said softly. And to his own horror, Lex realized he didn't hate it quite as much as he was supposed to. Lex prided himself on running a tight ship, both in business and in his personal life. There was a schedule, a system, a rhythm to his days, and deviation from that rhythm was a waste of valuable time. Samantha, it seemed, had taken that philosophy as a personal challenge. It started small. One rainy afternoon, Lex came home from a meeting to find Sam curled up on the cream leather sofa in his favorite hoodie, a black cashmere blend that he'd had custom-made in Italy. She was sipping tea and scrolling through her phone like she'd owned it for years. "That's mine," he said, shrugging off his coat. She glanced up. It was cold. It's cashmere. It's soft. It cost more than most people's monthly rent. She sipped her tea. "Then I guess I'm living in luxury." He opened his mouth, ready to deliver a lecture about respect for property, but something about the sight of her in that hoodie, oversized on her frame, sleeves pulled down over her hands, made his brain falter. He settled for muttering, "Don't spill anything on it," before retreating to his office. A week later, Sam announced she was running errands and asked to borrow one of his cars. Lex, expecting she meant the Range Rover, tossed her the keys without looking up from his laptop. He didn't realize until 2 hours later, when his security team texted him, that she had taken the Ferrari. When she returned, parking it crookedly in the garage, he stood there with his arms crossed. "You took the Ferrari." She climbed out, sunglasses perched on her head, looking like she'd just stepped out of an action movie. "It drives like a dream. It's not an errand car. Tell that to the guy at the hardware store who gave me a discount because he thought I was in a Fast and Furious movie." He stared at her, torn between outrage and the urge to laugh. "You are never taking that car again." She said, breezing past him. "We'll see." Lex discovered the next perk when he opened his walk-in closet one morning and found that his meticulously arranged rows of suits were different. "What is this?" he demanded, holding up a navy blazer with a patterned pocket square already tucked in. I reorganized, Sam said from the doorway, holding a mug of coffee she'd clearly brewed for herself in his kitchen. Now your shirts are grouped by occasion instead of color. Business casual, date night. I don't need a date night section, he said. She grinned. You're married to me. You absolutely do. He blinked at her. Did you move my cufflinks? They're in the special occasions box, next to your favorite tie. I don't have a favorite tie. You do now. The final straw, or so he told himself, came one Monday morning when he stumbled into his bathroom, still half asleep, and found a neon pink sticky note on the mirror. Don't forget, you're amazing. Just ask yourself. He peeled it off and tossed it in the trash. The next day, there was another one. Remember, everyone wants to be you. Try not to rub it in. Then, today's a great day to buy your wife flowers. By Friday, his bathroom mirror looked like a motivational hostage situation. The strangest part wasn't the disruption itself. It was how quickly he stopped fighting it. Somewhere between the hoodie incident and the sticky note invasion, Lex realized his penthouse didn't feel quite so sterile anymore. He caught himself expecting her to be there when he came home, waiting for her sarcastic quips over breakfast, even checking the garage to see which car she'd taken. Daniel, ever observant, noticed too. You're different, he said one afternoon. I'm not different, Lex replied automatically. You haven't yelled at anyone in a week, Daniel pointed out. Lex scowled. Coincidence. But when he returned home that evening and found Sam sprawled on the couch, hair in a messy bun, wearing his hoodie again, he felt the corner of his mouth twitch upward before he could stop it. It began innocently enough. At least, that's what Lex told himself. One Tuesday morning, he was standing in his closet, holding two ties, a deep burgundy silk and a pale gray with a subtle pattern. Normally, he would have picked the burgundy without a second thought. It projected authority, confidence, and control. But for some reason, he walked out into the kitchen, ties in hand, where Sam was sitting cross-legged on a barstool eating toast. Which one? He asked. She looked up, a smear of jam on her lip. Is this a trick question? No, he held them out. She studied them for a moment, then pointed at the gray. Burgundy says, I'm here to crush souls. Gray says I'm approachable, but I'll still win. He stared at her. Gray it is. It happened again 2 days later. He was reviewing a marketing campaign for one of his luxury resorts when he found himself carrying the mock-ups into the living room. Tell me what you think, he said, setting them in front of her. Sam, who was in the middle of reorganizing his bookshelf, much to his dismay, raised an eyebrow. Since when do you care what I think about beachfront villas in the Maldives? Just humor me. She flipped through the images, pointing at one. This one's good. Feels like a fantasy you could actually touch. The others? Too staged. They screamed stock photo. He took the papers back without comment, but later, at the marketing meeting, he said, lose the staged ones. Go with this. He didn't mention the suggestion had come from his wife. The turning point came at a black-tie charity dinner. Sam had agreed to attend only after Lex promised there'd be an open bar and minimal small talk. Halfway through the evening, one of Lex's ex-wives, number 5, if he remembered correctly, approached with a saccharine smile and a champagne flute. Lex, darling, she said, touching his arm. Still collecting wives like fine china, I see. Her gaze slid to Sam. And you must be the latest pattern. Before Lex could respond, Sam's smile widened. Yes, and unlike China, I'm not fragile. I also don't chip easily, so you might want to be careful with the shade. The ex-wife blinked, then muttered something about the powder room and vanished. Lex turned to Sam, stunned. You just handled it? You're welcome. She took a sip of her drink, unbothered. He didn't say anything else for the rest of the evening, but on the drive home, he found himself glancing at her profile in the dim light of the car, an odd warmth spreading through his chest. A week later, Lex came down with a brutal flu. He hated being sick, not because of the symptoms, but because it meant losing control of his schedule. He spent the first day barking orders from bed, insisting he could still work between coughing fits. By day 2, Sam had confiscated his phone and set a strict regime of tea, soup, and rest. She sat beside him on the bed, laptop open, answering his emails in her own sarcastic style. You told Gerald from Acquisitions that he needs to relax his grip on the merger before he pops a vein, Lex croaked. He does, she said, spooning soup into his mouth like he was a toddler. You're insufferable. You're welcome. Somewhere between the soup and the sarcastic commentary, Lex realized that having her there, fussing, teasing, refusing to let him wallow, didn't feel like an intrusion. It felt safe. That night, lying in the dim light of the bedroom, he caught himself watching her read beside him, hair spilling over her shoulder, face lit by the soft glow of the lamp. He'd never admit it aloud, not yet, but he knew. He was falling for her, and he had no idea how to stop it. Lex Scott was not a man who stumbled over his words. He was the one doing the stumbling to other people, knocking them off balance, taking control of conversations, making sure every interaction ended on his terms. But tonight was different. It started with Loretta's weekly family dinner, which she'd insisted on hosting despite the fact that Lex hadn't missed a single one since his marriage to Sam. Normally, these dinners were a blend of polite society chatter and Loretta's covert inspections of her son's life choices. But this evening, Lex couldn't concentrate on anything except the fact that Sam was across the table, laughing at something his mother had said, eyes crinkling at the corners, completely at ease in a room full of people who would have chewed up and spit out his previous wives. He'd spent weeks trying to figure out when it had happened, when she'd gone from an irritant to this. He couldn't pinpoint it. Maybe it was the morning she'd wrapped an arm around him, like she had a right to be there. Maybe it was when she'd stepped in front of an ex-wife without blinking. Or maybe it was every tiny, infuriating thing she'd done since the moment they met. Whatever it was, he knew. And he had to say it before it drove him insane. After dinner, Lex found her in the kitchen, rinsing wine glasses while Loretta chatted with a guest in the living room. "We need to talk," he said. Sam glanced over her shoulder. "That sounds ominous." "It's not ominous. He frowned, realizing he had no script for this. "It's something else." She set the glass down. "Okay, you've got 30 seconds before I assume you're asking for a divorce." He blinked. "What? No. Why would you? 11 marriages, Lex. I feel like it's a reasonable guess." "I'm not asking for a divorce," he said firmly. I'm terrible at this." She crossed her arms, waiting. "I like you," he blurted. Then, because that felt too simple, he added, "More than I've liked anyone in a long time. Maybe ever." Sam's eyebrow lifted. "That's surprisingly straightforward for you." "I'm not finished." He ran a hand through his head, pacing slightly. "You're infuriating. You don't follow rules, you steal my clothes, you move my cufflinks, and you drive my Ferrari like it's a bumper car. But," he stopped pacing and looked directly at her, "but I think about you when you're not there. I look forward to coming home because of you. And I don't want to imagine this place without you in it." Her lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. "Lex Scott, are you saying you love me?" "I'm saying," he hesitated, then exhaled. "Yes. Fine. I love you. There. Are you happy?" Sam stepped closer, tilting her head. "Took you long enough. That's it? That's your response?" She shrugged. "I already knew. I was just waiting for you to catch up." Lex stared at her, incredulous. "You knew?" "Of course I knew," she said, looping her arms around his neck. "You stopped being fun to mess with the second you started making me coffee in the morning without me asking." "That was not a love gesture," he protested weakly. She murmured and kissed him. Later that night, back at the penthouse, Lex found himself stretched out on the couch with Sam curled against him, her feet tucked under a blanket, hair damp from a shower. "This doesn't mean you've tamed me," he said, just to be contrary. She snorted. "Oh, please. You're like a golden retriever now. All you need is a leash." "I'm still dangerous," he insisted. "Sure, babe," she said, patting his chest. "Keep telling yourself that." From the kitchen, Loretta's voice floated in, amused and triumphant. "I told you she was perfect for you." Lex just sighed, pulling Sam closer. For once, he didn't feel the need to argue. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.